The crystalline beings of the Zarathi Empire floated in their command chamber, their transparent bodies pulsing with colors that shifted from calm blue to alarm crimson. They had ruled 17 star systems for over 3,000 years, and nothing in their vast experience had prepared them for what they were seeing on their screens. The distress beacon from Kepler 442 had been broadcasting for 6 standard hours. The message was simple, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. An entire solar system was dying. Not from war, not from plague, not from any natural disaster Galaxy had ever seen before. Machines were eating it. "Show me the recordings again," demanded High Counselor Vextai, his crystalline form crackling with nervous energy. The holographic display flickered to life, showing what remained of Kepler 442's fourth planet, where a thriving world of 8 billion beings had existed just days before. Now only a skeletal framework of metal remained. The machines hadn't just destroyed the planet. They had consumed it, processed it, and transformed it into more themselves. The beings responsible for this horror were unlike anything in the galactic database. They moved with perfect coordination, their dark hulls bristling with harvesting equipment that could strip the atomic structure from solid matter. The survivors called them Devourers, and their message was clear. These things didn't negotiate, didn't communicate, and didn't stop. Across the chamber, War Minister Colthran pulled up tactical projections that made everyone's crystalline cores dim with fear. "Our best simulations show we need 50,000 warships minimum. That's every battle-capable vessel from every member species, fighting in perfect coordination." His voice carried the weight of someone who knew the numbers didn't add up. "Even then, our probability of success is only 37%. The Galactic Council had never faced anything like this. For millennia, they had resolved conflicts through diplomacy, trade agreements, and the occasional show of technological superiority. Their wars were clean, precise affairs fought at vast distances with energy weapons and tactical computers. The idea of machines that simply devoured everything in their path was beyond their experience. "We have no choice," announced Supreme Arbiter Zenkau, the eldest being in the chamber. "Send the call. Every species, every system, every ship that can fire a weapon. If we don't stop them here, they'll consume the entire galaxy." The emergency broadcast went out on every frequency, translated into 700 languages, and transmitted to every corner of known space. The message was desperate and direct. Come help immediately or watch everything end. Within hours, responses began flooding in. The proud warrior clans of the Mandorian systems pledged their fleet. The technological masters of the core worlds promised their most advanced vessels. Species that have been enemies for centuries agreed to fight side by side. But then something unexpected happened. A response came from the Galactic Rim, from a region so dangerous that the Council had declared off-limits over 2,000 years ago. The signal was rough, filled with static, and transmitted on primitive frequencies that most civilized species had abandoned long ago. "This is Admiral Jack Thompson of the Terran Defense Force. We received your distress call about the machine threat. We know what you're dealing with. We're coming." The transmission cut out, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The Zarathi had detailed records of that quarantined region, a collection of systems so hostile and violent that they had spawned legends throughout the galaxy. Every planet in that sector was classified as a death world, places where the environment itself seemed designed to kill anything foolish enough to land there. The beings who lived there, if any still existed, were supposedly as dangerous as their worlds. "Should we decline their assistance?" asked Junior Counselor Petran, her young crystalline form flickering with uncertainty. "The quarantine exists for good reasons." War Minister Colthran studied the tactical displays with growing desperation. "Look at these numbers again. We need every ship we can get. If these humans actually have military capabilities, we can't afford to refuse." What none of them knew was that humanity had been fighting things like the Devourers for the past 40 years. They called them different names, Reapers, Harvesters, Metal Death, but the principle was the same. Machines that consumed worlds and turned them into more machines. The difference was that humans had learned to fight them not through superior technology or careful strategy, but through sheer, bloody-minded determination to survive at any cost. In the depths of space, the human fleet was already moving. Their ships looked like they had been built in scrapyards and held together with determination. Their weapons were primitive by galactic standards, their armor was patched and repatched, and their crews had the kind of scars that came from fighting impossible odds and winning through pure stubbornness. The Galactic Council was about to learn that when Deathworlders went to war, the very concept of impossible became meaningless. They just didn't know it yet. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a collection of flying scrapyards, and every sophisticated sensor array in the Galactic Council's armada immediately went haywire. Where the crystalline beings expected to see sleek dreadnoughts with perfect hull plating and symmetrical weapon arrays, they instead witnessed something that defied every principle of civilized starship design. The lead vessel looked like someone had welded 3 different ships together and then beaten the result with hammers. Mismatched hull sections were held together with what appeared to be industrial adhesive and prayer. Weapon systems jutted out at odd angles, clearly added as afterthoughts. The engine configuration made no sense according to any known engineering principles. Yet somehow, the thing was not only flying, it was flying fast. Admiral Jack Thompson's voice crackled through communication array with a casualness that made the Council's diplomatic corps collectively shudder. This is the TDF Stubborn Mule, requesting docking permission. We brought party favors and a really bad attitude. Where do you want us to park this rust bucket? High Counselor Vextai's crystalline form flickered through several shades of confusion. In his 3,000 years of diplomatic service, no one had ever referred to their flagship as a rust bucket or mentioned party favors in the same sentence as a galactic emergency. The Council's first contact protocols, refined over millennia of careful cultural exchange, had no provisions for this level of casual reverence. Admiral Thompson, Vextai began, his voice carrying the formal tones reserved for interspecies diplomacy. We welcome your species to this gathering of civilized races. Perhaps we might begin with cultural exchange ceremonies and discuss the philosophical foundations of our alliance against. Yeah, we're going to skip the handshake party, Thompson interrupted, his transmission crackling with static for what sounded like someone welding in the background. How about you point us toward these metal-eating machines, and we'll figure out how to turn them into scrap. We brought enough explosives to make a small moon very unhappy. The docking bay that received Thompson's shuttle had been prepared according to strict diplomatic protocols. The Council's finest cultural attaches waited in ceremonial robes, ready to perform the ancient greeting rituals that had maintained peace between species for thousands of years. They expected graceful beings who would appreciate the subtle art of negotiation and the careful dance of interstellar politics. What emerged from the shuttle was Admiral Thompson in combat armor that looked like it had been through several wars and somehow survived all of them. The metal was scarred, dented, and repaired so many times that its original color was anyone's guess. He carried a massive duffel bag that clinked ominously with every step. Without waiting for formal introductions, Thompson strode directly to the sacred negotiating table, a crystalline masterpiece that had hosted peace treaties for 2 millennia, and dropped his bag on its pristine surface. The contents spilled out, improvised explosive devices, jury-rigged detonators, and what appeared to be mining charges modified for purposes that probably violated several galactic conventions. Homemade boom makers, Thompson explained cheerfully to the horrified diplomatic corps. We figured you might need some unconventional solutions. Now, someone want to show me what these devourer things look like, so we can start planning their funeral. The Council's military advisors began presenting their carefully prepared briefings about devourer capabilities, showing tactical analyses and theoretical countermeasures that had taken their finest minds weeks to develop. Thompson listened for exactly 90 seconds before holding up his hand. Hold on, he said, studying the holographic displays with the expression of someone examining a particularly interesting puzzle. These things eat metal and turn it into more themselves? Correct, confirmed War Minister Colfran. They consume all manufactured materials and they're basically self-replicating factory ships that turn everything they touch into more factory ships. That is a crude but accurate assessment. Thompson grinned, an expression that somehow managed to be both friendly and deeply unsettling. Oh, we've fought these before. Different design, same basic idea. We call them Tuesday. The silence that followed this statement stretched long enough for several council members to question whether their translation matrices were functioning properly. Finally, Junior Counselor Petran managed to speak. Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday morning cleanup duty. We've got 3 of these infestations in our home system. The trick isn't to fight them with fancy technology. Thompson gestured toward the Council's pristine tactical displays. The trick is to be crazier than they are. Captain Lisa Parker, who had been quietly studying the Devourer schematics, looked up with a kind of smile that made experienced soldiers nervous. These things have a centralized command structure. That's adorable. It's like they want us to blow up their brain. The Council's representatives found themselves facing a terrifying realization. They had expected to receive advanced allies who would help them develop sophisticated countermeasures. Instead, they had summoned beings who looked at galaxy-ending threats and saw opportunities for creative destruction. The humans weren't here to save civilization through superior tactics or technology. They were here to out-crazy the machines at 8 worlds, and they seemed genuinely excited about the challenge. The Galactic Council's military doctrine had been perfected over thousands of years of civilized warfare. Their ships maintained precise formations, engaged enemies at maximum range, and relied on energy shields and computer-guided targeting systems. Everything was calculated, measured, and executed with mathematical precision. When they fought, casualties were minimal and victories were clean. The humans threw all of that elegant theory straight into the nearest star. Captain Lisa Parker stood in the human fleet's makeshift command center, which looked more like a mechanic's workshop than a military headquarters. Welding sparks flew in the background as her crew retrofit their ships with modifications that would have horrified any sane engineer. She watched the Council's tactical briefings with the expression of someone who had just been told that water was wet. "So let me get this straight," Parker said, addressing the holographic projection of War Minister Colthran. "Your standard battle plan is to form up in neat lines and shoot energy beams at them from a safe distance." "It is the most efficient method of engagement," Colthran replied, his crystalline form glowing with professional pride. "Our simulations show optimal effectiveness when maintaining formation integrity and maximizing our technological advantages." Parker looked around at her crew, and several of them started chuckling. Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez wiped grease off his hands and shook his head. "Lady, with all respect, your simulations are about to meet reality, and reality doesn't give a damn about formation integrity. The humans had spent the past 6 hours converting their cargo holds into something that defied every known principle of space combat. They filled massive shipping containers with asteroids, chunks of metal debris, and anything else with sufficient mass. The plan was simple in a way that falling off a cliff was simple. Accelerate everything to ridiculous speeds and throw it at the enemy until something important broke. You're going to use rocks?" asked Junior Counselor Petran, her voice carrying the disbelief of someone watching barbarians sharpen sticks to fight laser cannons. "Rocks moving at 30% of light speed," corrected Commander Mike Davis, who was personally welding nuclear warheads to what used to be mining equipment. "At that velocity, physics doesn't care if it's a rock or a sophisticated missile. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy, and these metalheads are about to learn some very basic lessons about momentum." The Zarathi observers watched in growing horror as the humans began implementing tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They weren't just modifying their weapons. They were weaponizing the laws of physics themselves. Empty fuel containers became improvised missiles. Broken ship components were retrofitted as boarding pods designed to crash through enemy hulls like meteors. Lieutenant Colonel James Foster explained their philosophy while casually programming guidance systems that looked like they had been built from spare parts. "See, the thing about fighting machines is that they're really good at predicting logical responses. They calculate optimal strategies and plan countermeasures for rational tactics. So our solution is simple. Don't be rational." When the Devourer swarm finally appeared on the sensor screens, the Council's fleets moved into their carefully rehearsed formations. Every ship knew its position. Every weapon was calibrated for maximum efficiency, and every commander followed protocols that had worked for centuries. They engaged the enemy with precision strikes and coordinated volleys that should have demonstrated the superiority of organized civilization. The Devourers tore through them like paper. The machines moved within human coordination, their adaptive algorithms instantly analyzing and countering every traditional tactic. Energy shields meant nothing to weapons that simply reconfigured themselves to penetrate. Precise formations became death traps when the enemy could predict every movement. Within minutes, the Council's perfect battle plans were in ruins. That's when the humans made their entrance. Instead of forming neat battle lines, the human ships scattered in every direction like startled insects. They accelerated chunks of asteroids to impossible speeds and launched them not at the Devourer fleet, but at nearby planetary bodies, using gravitational wells to slingshot their improvised projectiles into unpredictable trajectories. Captain Robert Clark's voice echoed across the communication channels as his ship, the definitely not compensating, fired what appeared to be an entire mining station at the enemy flagship. You want to eat our stuff? Here, choke on this. The Devourer's tactical computers, designed to counter logical military strategies, had no response program for opponents who treated every piece of space debris as potential ammunition. Their predictive algorithms crashed trying to calculate responses to tactics that changed every few seconds based on whatever the humans found lying around. Rodriguez had somehow converted his ship's waste disposal system into a kinetic bombardment platform. "We're literally throwing garbage at them," he announced with obvious delight. "And it's working." The human approach to warfare wasn't just unconventional. It was actively chaotic. They used damaged ships as guided missiles, turned mining equipment into close combat weapons, and somehow convinced several small moons to change their orbits in tactically useful ways. Every engagement became an improvised disaster that somehow turned into victory through sheer determination and creative use of available materials. The Council's observers watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated that the difference between civilization and survival wasn't technology or organization. It was a willingness to turn absolutely anything into a weapon when your back was against the wall. The Devourers had consumed 17 worlds without meeting meaningful resistance. They had never encountered a species that responded to overwhelming force by becoming more overwhelming, more chaotic, and more dangerous than the threat itself. As human ships continued their seemingly suicidal charges into the enemy formation, one thing became clear to every being watching. These weren't just warriors from a death world. These were beings who had learned to make death worlds surrender to them. The battle had been raging for 12 hours, and the Galactic Council's understanding of warfare was crumbling faster than their defensive lines. They watched from their command ships as humanity demonstrated that everything they thought they knew about military strategy was wrong. The Devourer mothership hung in space like a mechanical nightmare, its hull bristling with harvesting equipment designed to strip planets down to their atomic components. It was the size of a small moon, protected by adaptive armor that had already proven immune to every weapon in the Council's arsenal. Their most powerful energy cannons barely scratched its surface. Their precision missiles were intercepted by defensive systems that seemed to learn from each attack. The Council's tactical computers had declared the mothership invincible. The humans looked at it and saw a target. Captain Robert Clark's voice crackled over the communication channels with the kind of calm that came from years of doing impossible things. "Command, this is Clark. I've got a plan, but you're probably not going to like it." Admiral Thompson's response came immediately. "Let me guess. It involves something exploding." "Everything exploding, actually. I'm going to ram my reactor core straight down their throat and see how they like fusion for breakfast." The Council's observers watched in mounting horror as Clark's ship, the Lucky Break, began accelerating directly toward the Devourer mothership. This wasn't a coordinated strike or a calculated sacrifice. This was a human being deciding that if he was going down, he was taking the biggest enemy he could find with him. "Clark, you magnificent lunatic," called out Commander Kate Williams from her own battered vessel. "Save some glory for the rest of us." "Plenty to go around," Clark replied, his ship's engines now glowing white-hot as he pushed them far beyond safe operational limits. "Besides, I always wanted to see what happens when you mix antimatter with alien metal. Consider this a science experiment." The Devourer's defensive systems tried to intercept the incoming ship, but Clark had done something that violated every principle of space combat. He had turned off his ship's navigational computers and was flying manually, making course corrections based on pure instinct. The machines couldn't predict his movements because even Clark didn't know exactly where he was going until the last second. As the Lucky Break punched through the mothership's hull like a supersonic hammer, Clark's final transmission echoed across the battlefield. Tell my kids her old man went out with the biggest boom in galactic history. The fusion explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. The Devourer mothership, what had seemed invincible moments before, cracked open like an egg and began venting atmosphere and mechanical components into space. But the humans weren't finished. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster led a boarding party onto one of the smaller Devourer vessels using tactics that made the Council's military advisors question their own sanity. Instead of advanced combat suits and sophisticated weapons, Foster's team carried cutting torches, crowbars, and what appeared to be construction equipment jury-rigged for violence. The trick to fighting robots, Foster explained over the comm as his team literally tore through the enemy ship's interior, is to remember that they're machines. They think in straight lines. So we don't give them any straight lines to think about. The boarding party moved through the Devourer's ship like a controlled explosion. They didn't follow corridors. They made new ones with shaped charges. They didn't disable systems carefully. They ripped them apart with industrial tools and improvised weapons. When they encountered Devourer defensive units, they responded with the kind of creative destruction that came from growing up on worlds where everything was trying to kill you. Major Betty Harris coordinated the assault while simultaneously reprogramming captured Devourer systems to work against their own fleet. These things are smart, she reported, but they're not creative. They keep trying to repair damage using standard protocols. So we keep breaking things in ways that aren't standard. The Galactic Council's officers watched their sensor readings with growing disbelief. Human casualties should have been catastrophic. They were fighting in environments that would kill most species instantly, vacuum exposure, radiation levels that would cook organic tissue, and gravity fields that shifted without warning. Instead of dying, the humans adapted. When the artificial gravity on Foster's ship failed, his crew simply magnetic clamped their boots to the deck and kept fighting. When life support systems were damaged, they switched to emergency oxygen and treated it like a minor inconvenience. When Devourer boarding parties breached their hulls, human crews activated something they called emergency venting protocols that turned their own ships into vacuum-powered weapons. You're using your life support system as a tactical advantage? Asked War Minister Colfran, his crystalline form pulsing with colors that had no translation in any known language. Chief Engineer Rodriguez answered while manually rerouting power systems that were currently on fire. Everything's a weapon if you're creative enough about it. These metalheads want to board our ships? Fine. Let's see how they handle explosive decompression mixed with superheated plasma from our damaged cooling systems. The humans weren't just winning through superior firepower or advanced technology. They were winning because they had learned to treat their own mortality as a tactical resource. Every human ship that was damaged became more dangerous, not less. Every system that failed was immediately repurposed as an improvised weapon. Every crew member who got hurt just got angrier. The Devourer's algorithms, designed to counter logical military responses, had no framework for dealing with opponents who responded to mortal danger by becoming more aggressive. Their tactical computers couldn't process strategies that involved deliberately damaging your own equipment to create weapons that didn't exist in any database. As the battle continued to rage, one thing became clear to every observer. The humans weren't just fighting the Devourers. They were demonstrating that when Deathworlders went to war, the very concept of acceptable losses became meaningless. They fought like beings who had learned that survival meant being willing to break every rule, ignore every limit, and turn every disadvantage into a weapon. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave the most dangerous species in known space a really good reason to get creative with explosives. The last Devourer ship died with sound like tearing metal and screaming engines, its hull splitting apart as human-modified mining charges detonated throughout its superstructure. The silence that followed was deafening, not because space was quiet, but because for the first time in weeks, nothing was exploding. Admiral Jack Thompson stood on the bridge of the Stubborn Mule, watching debris fields that had once been an unstoppable mechanical armada drift past his viewports. His crew was celebrating with something they called Victory Bourbon, which apparently came in unmarked bottles and tasted like liquid fire. The bridge itself looked like it had been through a blender, with exposed wiring scorch marks, and at least 3 different jury-rigged control systems that somehow kept the ship functioning. The Galactic Council's representatives approached cautiously, their crystalline forms still flickering with the aftershocks of what they had witnessed. High Counselor Vextai materialized on the bridge through their advanced holographic systems, looking every bit as pristine and untouched as he had before the battle began. "Admiral Thompson," Vextai began, his voice carrying formal diplomatic tones that seemed absurdly out of place surrounded by battle damage and celebrating humans. "The Council wishes to express our profound gratitude for your species' assistance in this crisis. Without your intervention, the Devourers would have consumed our entire civilization." Thompson took a long drink from his unmarked bottle and shrugged. "Don't mention it. We needed the target practice anyway." The casual dismissal of saving an entire galactic civilization as target practice left the Council delegation speechless. They had prepared speeches about honor, duty, and the bonds forged in the crucible of war. None of their diplomatic training had prepared them for allies who treated galaxy-saving heroics like a weekend hobby. Commander Kate Williams, her uniform torn and her face streaked with grease and what might have been blood, leaned against a control console that was currently held together with military-grade tape. "The thing is," she said, addressing the Council directly, "you all fight like you're trying to win a war. We fight like everything in the universe has been trying to kill us since we crawled out of the ocean, and we're really tired of it." Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez looked up from where he was rebuilding a control system using parts salvaged from a coffee machine and a broken computer terminal. "Back home, we got plants that shoot poison, whether that can kill you in 6 different ways, and neighbors who think nuclear warfare is a reasonable response to territorial disputes. Fighting killer robots is honestly kind of relaxing by comparison." The Council's military advisors had spent the entire battle taking notes, trying to understand how human tactics worked. What they discovered challenged everything they believed about warfare and survival. The humans didn't just adapt to impossible odds. They had evolved specifically to thrive in conditions that would destroy any rational species. "Your casualty rate should have been catastrophic," observed War Minister Colfran, his crystalline core pulsing with confused colors. "You engaged in direct combat with superior numbers, fought in environments lethal to organic life, and used tactics that risked destroying your own vessels. Yet your losses were minimal." Lieutenant Colonel Danny Foster, who still had Devourer lubricant stains on his armor from the boarding action, laughed while cleaning his improvised weapons. "That's because we don't think of dying as failure. We think of not taking the other guy with us as failure. Big difference in approach." The philosophy behind human warfare was becoming clear to the Council, and it terrified them more than the Devourers had. These beings didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive, and they had learned that survival meant being willing to become more dangerous than whatever was trying to kill them. Major Betty Harris demonstrated this principle by showing the Council her emergency kit, a collection of improvised explosives, jury-rigged tools, and weapons made from spare parts that could apparently turn any confined space into a tactical advantage. "The secret," she explained, "is that everything can be a weapon if you're desperate enough and creative enough." When the Council formally offered humanity membership in their alliance, complete with advanced technology and access to their most sophisticated weapon systems, Thompson's response surprised everyone. "Thanks, but no thanks," he said, gesturing toward the viewport where human ships were already preparing to depart. "We appreciate the offer, but we like living on the rim. Out there, we can keep doing what we do best without worrying about noise complaints or property damage." Captain Parker added with a grin that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly unnerving. "Besides, you've got nice, peaceful worlds here. We'd probably break something important just by existing in the same neighborhood." As the human fleet began its departure, the Council faced a fundamental shift in their understanding of the galaxy. They had always believed that civilization meant rising above violence, that true advancement came from transcending the brutal struggle for survival. The humans had shown them something different, that sometimes the most civilized thing you could do was be willing to become utterly uncivilized to protect what mattered. The last transmission from the human fleet came from Rodriguez, who was apparently still working on repairs while his ship accelerated toward the galactic rim. "Hey, Council folks, if you ever run into anything else that needs killing, just holler. We'll bring the explosives and the bad attitude. It's what we do best." The galaxy was safer now, but it was also fundamentally changed. Everyone knew that somewhere out on the rim, there were beings who had turned survival into an art form and violence into a science. The humans had proven that Deathworlders didn't just exist. They excelled at making the impossible merely improbable, one explosion at a time.